Hello, and welcome back to Let's Play Dungeons & Dragons Warriors of the Eternal Sun with me, Dr. J. Things look extremely grim. After finally completing our charter to find allies for our people and bring back the good news to the Duke and Marmillion, we have arrived only to find that the town has been destroyed. We're too late. What could have caused this? Was it an attack? Are there any survivors? As we explore the ruins, our hearts sink to find no indication that there's anyone still inhabiting the remains of the keep, but one thing that's strange, there are no bodies. What could that mean? Where is everyone? If there are no bodies, does that mean they weren't killed? And if they weren't killed, where are they now? And this, by the way, is why gold is now useless to us and we'll never be able to buy anything again. Even though it looks like goods have just been left out on display and you'd think we could just grab them. Apparently not. What about the Duke? The throne is empty. The guards are gone. Marmillion? Marmillion lives. The Duke beat me and left me for dead. I had just enough healing potion to survive, but not enough to stop the pain. The people all went mad. They destroyed the city and fled into the forest. I was wrong about time travel. We are inside a huge zoo that houses lost civilizations of our previous world. I translated the Azcan runes and have discovered the valley we inhabit has an ancient being called a burrower beneath it. It drives all life forms crazy. Since you have traveled outside the valley, you have remained sane. Our only hope is to destroy it. To do so, you must cross the river and travel north. Follow the northern wall east, then go south to the swamps. There you will find the caverns of the evil elves. Take this scroll and read it when you find the burrower. It will summon the immortal Ka, who will destroy the beast. So this is, I guess you could say, the big plot reveal of the game. The big plot twist. So it turns out the reason everyone has been going crazy is because of this creature called the burrower. And the only reason that we haven't been going crazy too is because our quests have been taking us outside the valley at regular intervals. Now, I have been promising since the beginning of this LP that I would do a deep dive into the lore and backstory of this game. And so that's exactly what we're going to do right now, finally. We are now at the point where revealing all of this wouldn't constitute spoilers. So, let's go ahead and dive into what's really going on here that the game doesn't tell you. So, originally the official setting of BXD&D was called the Known World, and it started out as a fairly generic fantasy RPG setting. Over time, the setting was expanded far beyond the known world and incorporated much more original elements. These included, for example, Blackmoor, the campaign setting run by Dave Arneson, who was one of the two co-creators of Dungeons & Dragons, was made to be part of Mystara's distant past. Originally a medieval fantasy society, Blackmoor became a very technologically advanced civilization until it destroyed itself in an apocalyptic world-altering explosion called the Great Rain of Fire. Also, the gods of Mystara are actually mortals who achieved apotheosis and are known as immortals. They live on Mystara's moon, which is called Matera, in the city of Pandius. Also, there exists a powerful artifact called the Nucleus of the Spheres, which emits an energy called the Radiance, which can be used to drastically enhance magical power. The nucleus is actually the reactor from an alien spaceship that crashed on Mystara eons ago and was buried deep underground by the Immortals. The influence of the crashed spaceship might have been what caused the civilization of Blackmore to become technologically advanced and eventually destroy itself and all of civilization at the time. Clearly, there is a sci-fi element at play in Mystara, and depending on how you interpret the lore, you could pretty easily justify all the seemingly magical or supernatural aspects of the setting as actually having a science fiction basis. I know that sort of thing doesn't appeal to everyone, and for people who prefer pure or classic fantasy, that mixing in of sci-fi will rub them the wrong way. But personally, it appeals to me. I think it's cool when a setting seems like pure fantasy on the surface, but when you dig into it, there's actually a sci-fi explanation underpinning it. It's kind of hard to explain why I think this is cool, but when it's done well and there's kind of a big reveal, or maybe the player or reader or viewer is just able to piece together clues and realize what's actually going on behind the scenes, I think it can actually make for pretty cool revelatory moments. But as interesting as all of that is, it doesn't matter much to us for the purposes of Warriors of the Eternal Sun, because all of that either happens on the surface of the planet of Mystara or above the surface. But that's not where we are. At no point does the game tell you this, but we are actually inside Mystara. As it turns out, yet another unique element of this setting, and something that you could easily spin into having a sci-fi element as well, is that the world of Mystara is hollow, an idea that was explored in detail in the Hollow World boxed set, one of the last products ever published for this particular product line. An entire world exists on the surface of Mystara's hollow shell, with an eternal sun shining in its center. That's why the horizon seems to slope upward in all directions, and why there's a sun shining directly overhead in the center of the sky, in a fixed location, never moving. Another notable aspect of Mystara's hollow interior is that it is basically used as a giant preserve for species and civilizations that would have gone extinct on the surface, which obviously includes ours, since we were going to get genocided by a goblin horde. This preservation of extinct creatures and cultures is the work of the immortal Ka the Preserver, who's basically a T-Rex who became a god. So we can easily infer that it was Ka who teleported us into the Hollow World in the game's opening cutscene to save us from extinction. Ka, as it turns out, was the immortal who first discovered that the Hollow World exists in Mystara's interior. The Hollow World was actually uninhabited when Ka found it, so it was his idea to turn it into basically one giant preserve. Why Marmillion has a scroll belonging to Ka is never explained. The god who is worshipped by our people is never identified, so it could be Ka, and perhaps that's the reason he decided to intervene on our behalf, because we're followers of his. But if we had a scroll that we could use to summon Ka, one assumes that we would have used that scroll when we were about to get genocided by the goblins, so that answer doesn't make much sense. Maybe Marmillion discovered and deciphered the scroll of Ka among the artifacts that we've been bringing back to him from our adventures. That was my assumption when I played this game as a kid, and it's still the explanation that I favor the most, because otherwise there's a huge plot hole as to why we didn't use the scroll to save ourselves in the opening cutscene. Regardless, it's all just speculation because the scroll's origin is a mystery that the game never addresses. The final piece of lore that's relevant to us right now is that Ka's plan to use the Hollow World to save extinct creatures and cultures was not without opposition. An evil immortal of entropy named Thanatos created powerful, Lovecraftian horrors called Burrowers to infest the interior of Mystara and conquer the Hollow World, to use as a base of operations to spread their contagion throughout the planet. When Ka learned of this, he cast a spell of preservation that, amongst other effects, basically put the Burrowers into a comatose state. However, some of these creatures are still functioning, including obviously the one that's driving everyone in the valley insane in this game. And so there's the extended lore and backstory to Warriors of the Eternal Sun that the developers clearly knew about. They clearly had read all of this material because they make a lot of use of a lot of things from the Hollow World boxed set. Like the way the Beastmen work, the fact that there are certain extinct civilizations like the Azkans and the Oltecs, all of the physical characteristics of the Hollow World, the existence of the Burrower, the Immortal Ka. Obviously, the developers read up on all of this and incorporated a lot of it into the plot and setting of this game. But a lot of it is just never addressed or explained within the game itself at all. Honestly, it just feels really random and like it just comes out of left field, the way it's actually presented within the game itself. We find Marmillion here, and just completely out of nowhere, he's like, oh yeah, and there's this horrible creature called the Burrower that's been driving us insane, and we're actually inside this huge zoo. There's no explanation at all that we're inside the planet, that the planet is hollow. There's no explanation that all of this is the work of Ka the Preserver, who discovered the hollow interior of Mystara and decided to use it as a preserve for all these extinct creatures and civilizations. There is no real explanation of what the Burrower is. So it ends up feeling really kind of random, the way it's presented in the game. Now, I have mixed feelings about this. I think I might have mentioned this in a previous video. I probably did. So apologies if I'm repeating myself, but I do think that it can be cool when there is more to the backstory and the lore and the history and the setting than a story just comes right out and tells you. When there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of implied. And I think if that's done well, it can create a nice layered, textured feel to a story. Make it feel more, what's the word? I can't quite think of the adjective I want, but it can just really make things feel, I guess, kind of more mysterious and deeper if you can kind of pull off that backstory through implication instead of backstory through explicit exposition. And I think this game has some of that. Certainly when I played this game as a child, I got the feeling that there was more going on than the game was just coming right out and telling us. And it was kind of cool, the feeling that you get from that. That said, I think that the game maybe goes a little too far leaving things out. Because probably a lot of that backstory would really help to flesh things out. And even though the backstory is kind of wild, so it feels a little strange to say this, it would also kind of help things make more sense instead of just seeing like a bunch of random stuff that happens. Like there's at least some kind of order and rhyme and reason to it all. So, like I said, mixed feelings. I think that the game probably would have benefited from presenting a little bit more of this information to the player instead of just leaving almost all of it purely to implication, and some of it you couldn't even figure out through implication. So, once again, I think the limitations of the game's storytelling kind of come through here. And that if they had made more fleshed out cutscenes, it maybe would have helped with the story and make everything feel more immersive. And you can't just blame it all on the 16-bit technology, because there are some games from this era, I'm looking at you, Phantasy Star 4, that have really... You may be hearing my cat using her scratching toy there. There are definitely examples of games from this era that have much more characterization and more fleshed out stories than this game has. So it's not just because of the technological limitations. Anyway, so those are my thoughts about all of that. And if you weren't a level 9000 D&D nerd, so you didn't know all that information, hopefully that's given you new depth and perspective about what's going on in this game. Because I think knowing all of that really helps make things, deeper and more interesting. All that said, I've rambled for long enough, so it's finally time to progress. And we're in the end game now. We are progressing towards the end of the game, the end of the story. Now, although Marmillion told us to take the really long way around, literally the longest path you can travel in this game, to go west across the bridge, all the way north, do a circuit around the valley, and to the one cave we haven't been to yet. You can do that, but there is a better way that we can go because it's new, so it's not just retreading ground we've already been to. And it's also shorter. And it's here. Ooh, cave bears. We know how tough they are. Okay, why can't I... There we go, because they were attacking. Got a kite. So there's actually an entire cave system underneath the graveyard. Exactly what this is doing here, like so many things in this game, isn't explained, but this is the last of the secret dungeons, and secret dungeons are cool, so let's go ahead and check it out. Also, it's a shortcut. Oh, even though it's not necessary because zombies are so weak, as long as we're fighting a horde of undead, let's let our cleric do his thing and feel cool. Oh, one of them dodged. So this is yet another dungeon where there are mandatory secret doors you have to find in order to proceed. Once you get past the first couple dungeons of the game, this is a very common thing. It's not that big a deal because even if your characters fail to find a secret door, you can just look for it the hard way by bashing your head against the walls until you find a secret door. So it's not like in the pen and paper game where it's actually really stupid to gate progress behind secret doors because if the die roll doesn't come up in your favor and your character doesn't hit that 1 in 6 or 2 in 6 chance of finding a secret door, well, too bad for you, you don't get to progress the story, which that's terrible game design. And yet there are adventures that work that way, which is really just inexcusable. But in the video game, not a big deal because you can always just find secret doors manually. Boy, I'm already turned around. The layout of this place is weird. A lot of very twisty, turny hallways and the like. And yet it looks like it's a deliberately built structure, so it's not that way just because it's a natural cavern or anything. That's probably overkill for ogres, but a regular sword, I don't think so. Aha, Lucia actually did her job and found a secret door. Before I go through there, because I think it's a cache of items, I'm going to go ahead and drop the fire rings. Actually, do I want to do that? I was going to say I'm going to drop the Ring of Fire Resistance because it will free up so much inventory space and we're never going back to the fire bridge anyway, but I think they do also reduce the amount of damage we take from fire attacks. And we are going to be encountering enemies that have fire attacks, so maybe I'm going to want to leave them on after all. Actually, as long as we're on this screen, let's take inventory of these spell scrolls. So Cloud Kill, I think, is a 5th level spell, or 5th tier spell, which means you have to be level 9 to cast it. And our casters are level 7 and level 7. It's unlikely they're going to hit level 9, but I guess there's an outside chance it could happen. So we will hang on to Cloud Kill, just in case someone becomes high enough level to scribe it. Dispel Magic, I guess everybody must have that since no one has scribed it, so that we can drop. Death Spell is a tier 6 spell. You have to be 11th level to cast that. There's no way any of our characters are hitting 11th level. Unless I were to go way out of my way to grind, which isn't happening. So we're definitely going to cast Death Spell out of a scroll. We're not going to hang on to it to scribe it. Anti-Magic Shell is also 6th level, so that one too will cast out of the scroll at an appropriate time. Which isn't now. But, minor spoilers, there are enemy spellcasters coming up in the final dungeon. So we'll put an anti-magic shell on us when we reach them. Okay, the ogres had some valuables worth 432 gold pieces. So there wasn't actually an item cache, it was just gold. Now people, there was no way that I could turn without picking up, irritating. Fine, let's drop that. Again. I don't want you to spell magic. Go away. Lost my train of thought. Stone Giant. It is interesting how you can complete the game, and unless you go way out of your way to grind, in fact, you will complete the game at a far lower level than the maximum. And that means that you're likely to miss out on being able to cast a lot of the highest level spells, because your party, if you're not grinding like crazy, will never reach the levels that are necessary in order to cast those spells. Now that's certainly not unique to this game. In fact, I would say a lot of RPGs have a higher maximum level than you're likely to reach by just playing through the game. I think, for example, it's fairly typical in JRPGs for the max level to be like 99-ish, and yet you're often going to be about level 50 by the time you confront the final boss. So it's certainly not unique to this game by any means. And here, once again, we can see that there is a mandatory secret door that we missed. There it is. Crab spider. Sounds horrifying. Now this is an interesting area. It has the feel of like a crypt, as though each of these sort of pillars is a tomb. But you can't actually inspect any of them. So it's pure speculation as to whether that's the case. Never really explains what this place is, but... Okay, there's the next secret door, but it is under a graveyard. Actually, I think I missed some more treasure. I think that on the opposite side of this giant pillar room, I'll go ahead and call it the crypt, that there's another, yes, a secret door here. You find a pile of gems and jewelry. That's what I was going to say when I got distracted. Yes, good job, Lucia, finding the secret door that we already went through. That's what I was going to say when I got distracted by picking up that stupid scroll again. Some people complain about finding gold after the point where gold is useless because you can't use the shops anymore, and I understand that. The gold itself is useless. But I don't think that the treasure is completely pointless, because I'm pretty sure that you get experience points every time you pick up gold. So although we can't spend it, we are getting experience for it. So there is that. Pyrohydra. They didn't bother to make a new sprite that has multiple heads, so it just has the red dragon sprite. But it sounds like a nasty piece of work, so let's not allow it to do whatever it's planning to do. Bite us with multiple heads or unleash fire breath or whatever. All that kiting made me get turned around. I don't know if I'm going to have room to kite everywhere, so I should maybe prepare some entangles. And yet again, I forgot my buff. I shouldn't get so cocky that I think I'm so strong I don't need the buffs. That would be a good way to get myself defeated unnecessarily. A flap sail. That is a monster straight out of the Hollow World boxed set. A lot of the monsters that we encounter in this game, in fact, are from the Hollow World boxed set and are not standard BX monsters. They're like, you know, expansion monsters. Flap sail being one of them. It's just a giant lizard thing. I don't think that there is a real life creature, either extinct or currently living, called a flap sail. So unlike, for example, the Phobosuchus, I think that one's completely made up. I'm not positive though, so if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me if you happen to know. Oh, and we're out. Okay, that was the end of that little small optional dungeon. Nice shortcut though. It definitely doesn't take nearly as long going through that as it would going all the way around the valley. And like I said, new dungeon is always welcome. My biggest complaint about this game, honestly, is that I wish it had more content, which is a compliment to the game more than anything, because I love it so much. I just wish there was more to see and do. It would have been nice if they could have added another couple of extra dungeons, given the player more opportunity to gain levels so that you have the ability to use all these cool high-level spells without having to go way out of your way to level grind, which is really tedious. I've never particularly enjoyed level grinding. And here is the entrance to the final dungeon, the last cave. So that is what we are going to tackle in the next episode, which, unless things go horribly wrong and I get TPK'd and have to make multiple attempts at it, next episode is probably going to be the last one. We have reached the end game. So, hopefully you'll join me for that, and have a good one, everybody.